Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
Oh, cool. I'm sideways.
Great.
That was
What
weird.
just happened?
Wow. Oh my God, you guys, shit just went really sideways.
Literally.
Oh my God. I have no idea how to
before.
I don't know.
my hand, like the recording device is up there. My hands are back here and they were in my lap. I have no idea. Like I didn't touch anything.
Switched.
Okay. Oh my God, that's awesome. Yeah. But I mean, also, I kind of feel like we should push into this metaphor, right? And be like, okay, so this is what it looks like when shit goes sideways. And this is the way we
Right.
live. This is the way parents like us live, right? Shit is always sideways. And tell me you wouldn't get vertigo trying to navigate through the world like this, right? I mean, it's just.
And it's so crazy.
It's insane.
Like, you were talking about the kid and he was literally begging to like not go home so he didn't hurt people. It is.
Yeah.
The unit that I worked on was for kids that had been sexually perpetrated against and then became perpetrators.
Sure.
Anytime a kid said that they were going to perpetrate again, they got longer stay at the facility. They were not allowed to leave.
As they should.
If they were saying that, they were not allowed to leave. And that is just for like sexual perpetration and like sexual abuse. Like some of the things some of those kids did was hard to read and hard to like talk about. Sure. And the fact that they were saying they were going to do it again made the facility keep those kids longer. So the fact that a facility would send a kid home that's saying like they're going to murder somebody is just like wild to me. Like they have like it's the same with like people that are suicidal. Like they have a plan, they know what they're going to do, they have the means to do it, they keep that person. But a person that's homicidal has the means, has the plan, is going to do it, they send them home. Yeah. That's absolutely bonkers to me to like think about.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up a really good point about, there is a plan, and I'm going to be a little hyperbolic here, right? I'm exaggerating for comedic effect, but also in the hopes that it'll, kind of, I guess, spur people to understand like just how absolutely ridiculous this is, right? Like they will send a child home who not only is saying, oh, I will absolutely kill my mother. They'll be like, oh, I won't just kill my mother. I am going to take the sharpest knife we have. I'm going to sit it on the stove until it's, red hot as a poker. Then I'm going to go gouge out my mother's eyes with that. And then I'm going to cut her fucking head off, right? Like they can say all of that. And they're like, I have the knife hidden. You don't know where it is. I've already like got a place to hide the head. You know what I mean? Like they can have all these like really elaborate plans and they'll just be like, well, good luck. Yeah. Don't die. Right.
Yeah. The first time my daughter went inpatient, she actually said to the police officer, well, she had threatened me. She said, I'm going to slit your throat while you sleep. And then I'm going to leave in your van.
Nice.
And when the officers got on scene, she repeated it word for word for him that's what she was going to do. Fortunately, she answered all the questions right to get admitted for threat to self because they would not, because they told me flat out they would not admit her as threat to others, even though she made all of that. And in the meantime, while she's in the ER, because we were in the ER that time, almost 2 full days, and the nurse broke protocol and let me go home to grab some clothes. And while I went home, I tossed her room and found that she had the knife hidden and had the keys to my van hidden. And she had prepared for this plan, but it didn't matter. They would not keep her based on that.
So, this is, something just occurred to me. And it might be a completely crazy idea and it might be 100% wrong. But I wonder if, and so I think we talked last time about The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, right? Oh yeah, we did. So that was published in 2012. And so up until that point, right, there was a slow, steady decline in violence globally for humanity as a whole, generally speaking, right? But then the violence has gotten worse, and there are a lot of reasons that are COVID related, but I think it was happening before that even. I mean, yeah, it was actually, not, of course, because that's why, because, oh my God. Oh, what's his name? Nicholas Cruz, right? The Parkland shooting was in 2018. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's definitely pre-pandemic. But I wonder, because there has been more violence, right? And so I wonder if one of the many factors contributing to this, and this could even be completely, I know correlation does not equal causation, but this could be a particular specific instance where this could be a causation for the violence. I had no idea that this was happening with, adults, that they were not, that they were being released from these facilities. So if we're releasing people from facilities en masse, right, like the entire country, of course we have this much violence. I mean, for sure, right? Like, why wouldn't that be one of the major things that's causing this, is that we don't keep the people, in treatment until they are safe. I mean, if we're constantly releasing people who are homicidal or, maybe just violent, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to kill you, but they might want to beat the crap out of you with a baseball bat, right? Like, no.
Right. Well, it comes down to we have very narrow parameters for what allows them to hold someone against their will.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because of the horrific history of abuse by the government in holding people against their will. And so this is one of the places where that trying to safeguard against the abuses of the past have now left us open for issues in the present, because we don't have a mechanism. And
there's also a lot of people
constitutionally, from a legal standpoint, constitutionally, we can't punish people for things they've said. They have to take actual actions.
Sure.
And so that's why a lot of times people do get hurt.
There's a lot of
and
people
I don't know what
that
the
end
answer to that is.
like incarcerated instead of getting like the mental health help they need.
Yeah,
even though like there's no mental health like services available, because our mental health system in this country sucks ass. So they end up incarcerated, and then they get angry, and then when they get released, like they still don't get any help because there's no mental health system to help them and support them. And then them being incarcerated just further isolates them from everybody. And it's a big vicious circle. And I feel like a lot of it could be fixed with, a good mental health system as a basis.
A good mental
and
health
actually
system
rehabilitating people that are incarcerated, instead of just like, you get to sit in here and read a book sometimes and get, nasty food and be in a jail cell, and then you get released with no support in any kind of way.
Right. Yeah. A good mental health system. And also, I think we need to be proactively looking at providing interventions to children when these things are evident. Why are we waiting until they're grown and we're getting arrested?
I mean, stop doing maybe he'll grow out of it. Oh no, that's just normal teenage behavior. Oh well, he's got to be locked up now. Like, what?
It stops being normal teenage behavior the day they turn 18.
Right. Then suddenly they're an adult now. We're going to arrest them.
Yeah. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and I think that's why I've been pushing so hard, and I know people have been kind of dismissing me on that, but I think it's important that we need to change the diagnostic paradigm.
Absolutely.
And start looking at it, because for one, the diagnosing behaviors is not working, right?
No.
But the neurobiology is something that that's the underlying issue. And if we were to put more research into that, we might be able to actually come up with a diagnostic criteria where we can evaluate early in those formative years and potentially formulate some sort of intervention to, even if we can't, change the brain development entirely, we might be able to mitigate some of those behaviors that may result later.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the brains of people with this condition, right, they are malformed, which means they were, like, people will often confuse malformed and deformed. So deformed is like, defunding the police, right? It's deformed. Like, so it was originally one way, and then we have to unform it that way, if that makes, sense. Like, something happened to have your brain, be deformed, but then kids like ours, their brains were malformed. So they were straight out of the gate like that, right? This is not a regression. This isn't like, to give an analogy, like with a visual that will probably make more sense to the people who are watching, right? It's the difference between being born with a weazened limb and, having your hand and lower arm caught in a grape auger as an adult, right? Like, the one didn't necessarily develop, properly, while the other, that was an accident or something that, happened later. But the problem is, if we don't work with these children when their brains are the most elastic, right? Like, that's if we know their brain is malformed, why wouldn't you rehabilitate that right now when it's the easiest? Why would you wait a decade? Like, I think it's unconscionable. If you had a kid with a deformed leg or a club foot or whatever in front of you right now, you would never tell the parents, oh, let's wait till he's 18, see if he grows out of it. Why? Because they're still growing. And we want the children's brains and bodies to grow properly, right? Like, that's just sort of duh. And I think people think, mental health, right? Like, no, this is your operating system, right? Your brain, that is you, not your body, but your brain. You are your brain, right? Because that's where everything that we think of as you is, comes from. It's from your brain and whatever your operating system is. And it's not like, it's not like iOS or Android, right? It's like Summer has Summer's operating system and Carrie has Carrie's operating system and I have my, and so on and so forth. But like, if there's a problem in childhood, why don't you fix it so that they can properly grow, right? Rather than just kind of ignoring the malformation until it's too late to change it. Like, why wouldn't you do something to help them? It just, is it just because they're jerks and you don't want to be around them? I get that, but like, just because our kids are crappy to be around doesn't mean you shouldn't help them.
I think it's
right.
Probably because it just doesn't make them any money.
Well, and that's, I don't, that's a really, really good point because I can't remember if we talked about this at the last podcast, but I was going through my son's notes from the treatment facility and they had no sign of CD highlighted in the paperwork. This was 1 month after my son had broken out of this facility, gone and stolen a car, went for a joyride. These were other people at the facility too. Stole the freaking key for the car. And then when they got back, and they were all caught on security camera, right? And the other kids confessed immediately and were like, yeah, we're sorry, we did that. Wasn't me, right?
Like, I can see you. Was not me.
All the rest of the kids were like, yep, we did this. And my kid was like, wasn't me, right? And they're like, we have you on camera disarming. And by disarming, I mean, sort of destroying the alarm system so that you guys could get out. Everyone else has confessed and you are still insisting you didn't do that.
To do it.
Right.
It was
so we had that.
It was me. Wasn't
Exactly.
he?
And then, he also, like, we had to drive up to the facility, which wasn't even in California, right? It was an out of state facility, and we had to drive up there to visit with our son because he wasn't following any of the instructions. He wasn't doing anything he was supposed to do. Like, so
That's
that pattern of behavior where they lie and manipulate and steal and are unconcerned with performance. Isn't that? No, those aren't the diagnostic criteria of conduct disorder for which you just highlighted no evidence of CD.
Right.
Right. But insurance doesn't pay. So they highlighted no evidence of conduct disorder.
But if he had ADHD, okay.
Yeah. My daughter was almost always when she was admitted to residential facilities, they almost always put it down as major depressive disorder.
Or DMD.
And I would ask them, I'm like, why are you doing that when she's not depressed? Like, like I was in the room when you did the depression screening. And they're like, it's the only way to get insurance to pay.
Yeah, like major depressive disorder, DMDD, generalized anxiety disorder, or like autism. Even sometimes they'll put it down if they're even if they don't have it, they just suspect it. They'll put it down, and I'm like, but that's not doing anything to help anybody. They have to
falsify records,
like
in order to get paid and be able to provide services.
Yeah. Which is absolutely outrageous.
That's a little bit ironic that in order to stop people who lie and manipulate and steal,
they lie.
They have to lie and manipulate and steal. Yes. I mean, wow. I mean, it's such a, you wouldn't design this system on purpose. You absolutely would not, right? Like it's so dumb. You just wouldn't. And I think, I wonder too how much of, and I'm not saying this is all of it, but I wonder how much of the increase in children being diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder are just kids with conduct disorder who are either being entirely misdiagnosed because the clinician doesn't know what they're doing, and doesn't know the difference between the two things. And, I mean, to be fair, right, the three of us have been studying this stuff for years and years and years, right? Like, it's not a really easy thing for the clinician to necessarily be able to unravel with which is which, right? But there are clinicians that do that, but I don't know how much of, how much of this is intentionally falsifying records in order to get paid, or whether they genuinely don't know. But I'm wondering how much of the increase in children with autism diagnoses are people with conduct disorder who have been misdiagnosed. And I'm wondering that because in our group, 1 out of 3 parents report their child had an autism spectrum diagnosis prior to, either finding the group or finding somebody who would listen, because they were like, I don't think it's autism. This doesn't, I mean, there are some things like I can see that might resemble it, but I don't think this is autism. I think it's something different. And they're like, no. Every child with autism is different, right? And that's true, but like,
I think it's like a gross misunderstanding of what autism spectrum disorder actually is. And I think there's a lot of time, like not a lot of times, I think there's some times where like autism is comorbid with like CD. I remember working with a kid.
It shouldn't be, but
I don't know like what else it like could have been like, because I'm just thinking of like one specific kid who he was diagnosed with autism, and like he met all of the criteria for it, and he was like one of the most violent and aggressive 6-year-old I've ever met in my life. He tried to stab me with like blunt like safety scissors because I told him that I was not able to cut something out for him because I didn't have scissors that like were sharp enough to do it. So he tried to stab me for that. But he also like he met like all of the diagnostic criteria for like autism. Like he spoke in like a specific way, and he like played in specific ways, and he did all these things in
Mm.
specific ways, and had to have his routine like to the T. Otherwise he
Sure.
would have like a meltdown. And like we all tried our best to like work with him on that and like do whatever we could, but then he would also just, some days he would just like be sitting and staring at a kid and then violently attack them. Like would just throw shit at them and try to stab them with whatever he had nearby, and would just like snap for no apparent reason. Like it would be early in the morning and he would have been like playing and been fine and happy and just try to murder someone. It was wild. So I don't know like what it could be, because I know you said like conduct disorder and like autism can't be like comorbid, but I don't know. Like I can't think of like
Well,
what
I think
else it
part of
would
the
be.
problem is, I think that's part of the problem, that the fundamental flaw in the way the
Yeah.
diagnosis happens is
Yeah,
because
agreed.
it's diagnosed based on behavior.
Yeah,
Well,
correct.
multiple things can lead to the same behavior.
Mhm.
So, you know, he might be, you know, overwhelmed with emotion and attack someone, whereas, you know, my daughter attacks someone, you know, as a means to an end, but the
Right.
action may look exactly the same. And that's one of the fundamental problems with the diagnosis
Agreed.
based strictly on behavior, is how do you treat that, right? If you're saying,
Mhm.
oh, these are all conduct disorder because they do A, B, and C, okay, but if the underlying reason is different, you can't
Right.
treat those things the same and expect to
Agreed.
actually have a positive outcome.
Agreed. Absolutely.
I
For
also
sure.
questioned a lot if he was rad, because his
Mm.
dad was military, so he was gone a lot, and then his parents got divorced, and so he was in different households constantly, and then he was at a behavioral therapy center that I worked at, and so he was there with us 8 or 9 hours of the day instead of like being at home, like because his mom was a stay-at-home parent, and so instead of being at home he would be at the behavioral therapy center. And then he would constantly switch therapists throughout the day because we had to work in shifts with all of our kids. And so he was constantly like being flip-flopped and swapped between different people his whole life, basically. And so I wondered a lot if maybe he had rad, or if he just like the constant change was like overstimulating for him, and maybe that's why he did it. But he was definitely one of the most aggressive and violent like 6-year-olds I've ever met in my life.
Was he not able to verbalize what was
Oh no,
going
he could.
on? Or
He would tell you exactly what he was doing. He told me like when he tried to stab me, he was like, I'm mad that you can't cut this for me and I'm going to stab you. And I was like, thank you for using your words, but like, please don't stab me. And then we weren't allowed to use restraints or like be physical in any way, like to redirect the kid. We moved.
Right.
Like we were only allowed to move out of the way or like put something in between us. And like we weren't allowed to leave the room in case the kid hurt themselves. And that's a
Right.
safety thing. And our center could have got shut down and we could have been sued. So like the only options were to close the door so the kid could not run, and then just try to block as best we can and like walkie-talkie leadership. So
that
was great.
Man.
Yeah. So I'm assuming he probably like either was just like very like overstimulated with a lot of like emotions, like Summer said, and like he is in fact autistic, or if there is like something else, and like because of the diagnostics focusing solely on behaviors, if it may have been like something else like entirely, or like a lot of things combined, like that could happen. No
So
idea.
I think unfortunately we don't know enough about the brain to necessarily know with precision every time. We just don't.
Yeah.
But I think that's why we need to be putting more research into that to get a clearer picture. But
totally agreed.
Research
Although at this
is
point,
funded by pharmaceutical companies primarily. And so
if it's not ADHD, they probably won't fund it.
Right. It gets pointed in a certain direction, and there's some big gaps here that we need to be filling.
Yeah. I mean, but also we have enough research at this point to understand that the problem is dire. It is a public safety hazard, and we need to start building things now with what we have. Because the storm's coming. We need to build the shelters, or otherwise we're just going to get swept away in the friggin' hurricane. Sorry, I think I mixed my TV metaphors there, but
okay.
You get the
I
idea,
got you.
right? Like it's people want to wait until they have a handle on it and know exactly why. Well, we'll all be dead by that point.
Well, I don't think we can. I don't think we can ever know exactly why, unless we start putting in those systems that allow us to be looking more and learning more.
Exactly.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.